Hello ladies and gentlemen. Nintendo Switch came out in March of 2017, so a bit over 3 years ago, and since then most of the big companies ported their key franchises to the console, but Atlus seems to be different. The first game to come to Switch which had Atlus involved development-wise was Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Encore, which came out in January of this year. It is an enhanced port of the Wii U game from 2015 published by Nintendo. Next is Atlus's own Persona 5 Scramble The Phantom Strikers that came out in February of this year in Japan. It's a sequel to Persona 5, co-developed with Omega Force from Koei Tecmo, with the gameplay akin to Dynasty Warriors franchise. Another release to look at is Catherine Full Body that came out on the 2nd of July. Last week Atlus also added first Shin Megami Tensei game to Japanese Nintendo Switch online games lineup. Now, what do all of those games have in common, excluding the first Shin Megami Tensei? Questionable sales numbers. Tokyo Mirage Sessions open up with 18,797 physical copies sold in Japan, compared to 23,806 copies of the Wii U original. It was however at number 1 spot sales-wise in the eShop during its launch week. In UK the picture seemed a bit more positive for the launch sales, as the game was at number 11 in the sales charts compared to number 16 of the original release, and the first 2 days on the market were 17% better for the new release. So, while according to all of this data the sales don't look straight up bad, they don't seem particularly encouraging either, given the fact that in January there were over 50.5 million Switches sold, which is almost 4 times the amount of Wii U units. There are some things worth considering that were very likely to affect the sales. For one, the Japanese received the censored global version, and apparently when information about it came to light, the Wii U version became the best seller on Japanese Amazon. Another thing were stock shortages. The sell-through rate in Japan was between 60 and 80%, so while it doesn't necessarily sound like the situation was dire, some places might have been affected. Apparently the shortages were particularly noticeable in France. Lastly, there were some other major releases happening at the same time, such as Yakuza 7, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind DLC, and Atelier Dusk Trilogy DX. Now onto Persona 5 Scramble. The game came out both on PlayStation 4 and Switch, and exceeded sales expectations. What's interesting however is that the game sold over double the units on PlayStation 4. Once again, there are a couple of things to consider here. The first reason you're likely to hear for this is the fact that neither the original Persona 5 nor Persona 5 Royal are on Switch. While this is true, I think that there are still many opportunities to get into Persona 5. The game came out both on PlayStation 3 and 4, and there is also an anime adaptation and the manga. Another reason could be the fatigue with Dynasty Warrior style games. Switch in particular seems to have a lot of those, with titles like Hyrule Warriors or Fire Emblem Warriors. As for Catherine Full Body, things are looking bad. The game opened up with 6.9k physical copies sold in Japan, and while it's a nice number on its own, and fits the game itself, as the sales number is really low. To put it into perspective, the Vita version sold just shy of 8,000 copies during its first week. While it is just a number of physical sales for one region, I would still consider it as a strong indication of the poor overall sales. What's particularly peculiar about this result is the fact that Atlus advertised the port to no end, but in a way this outcome makes sense. There is a high chance that the Switch port would have sold much better if it released at the same time as the PlayStation versions. After all, the game first came out on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, later followed by PC port and then the enhanced versions for PlayStation 4 and Vita, so combining this with the fact that the story and gameplay set the game to be rather niche, it was an uphill battle for the Switch release, especially during pandemic when many people have reduced incomes. So looking at the amount of releases and their performance, it would kind of make sense for Atlus to be cautious towards Switch. It could also just boil down to the company not being particularly interested in the platform. PlayStation sales remain strong, and PC also seems like a way to go, with Persona 4 Golden surpassing 500,000 copies sold in less than a month since its release. Now a case could be made that Atlus simply made a lot of mistakes with all of those releases, but other companies can do way worse things and still easily turn a profit. Just look at Game Freak and Pokemon Sword and Shield. Yes, the comparison is a bit unfair, but I still think that it's a valid example, no less. With all that said, I think that Atlus still has big opportunities on the platform, and they are not necessarily tied to Persona. I think that would be a good idea for Atlus to focus on franchises that are well established within the Nintendo ecosystem, and Etrian Odyssey seems like a perfect contender. The series released numerous entries across DS and 3DS, and while it might not be huge, it certainly built a solid player base. Atlus already mentioned working on a new project for the franchise, and while it is very likely to be a Switch game, nothing new has been confirmed as of today. Mainline Shin Megami Tensei also has a big legacy on DS and 3DS, but I can imagine those titles being hard to port due to their utilization of two screens. Another thing to consider are the games from Vanillaware. Odin Sphere, Dragon's Crown, or 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim would make for great additions to the Switch library, and given that two of them are last-gen games with current-gen ports, they shouldn't be too tough to port to the console. So that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment and check the links in the description below where you can find my socials and links to sources that I used for this video. Take care and stay safe. See you next time.